What are we whispering about?
Alex had sent me this piece of music that he had channeled, and it really resonated with me. And I was actually meeting with my friends, I think it was a couple of days later. And I said to him, it'd be quite interesting to see what would happen if I played that music in my environment and how, if at all, the local Fae would react to it. So he said, yeah, that's fine with me. So we actually did it. It was at night. So we were under a shelter. We turned off the lights and I played the music. And as the music played, first thing we noticed was all the crickets that were chirping. They changed the rhythm of their chirps to match the rhythm of the music. And that's something that we all noticed, and that was really, really amazing. And if it sort of stopped it there, we would have been happy because that was sort of proof that there was some kind of interaction going on. And then we started hearing little footsteps running around the outskirts of where we were sitting.
In the air, by the sea, from the land, and within you and me. Fairies are whispering. This is Claire Casely, and I am a fairy whisperer. To catch a whisper, you have to listen closely. Listen with me. Hello and welcome to Fairy Whispering. I'm your host, Claire Casely. Sometimes on Fairy Whispering, I speak to guests that share common themes in their experiences. Last time I spoke to Alex about his experience with channeling music that he felt was from the gnomes. This time I speak to Jay, who is a mutual friend of mine and Alex. Jay is an artist who is based on the Gold Coast in Australia, and he shares some of his incredible experiences with fairy entities, and he also shares what happened when he played Alex's music with a group of friends. Jay grew up experiencing supernatural from a young age, and he shares some of those experiences as well as his encounters with some very unusual entities that look like trees, and one that looked like something that I've never heard of before. Plus we talk about our connection with fairies. You can see Jay's artwork on the podcast blog, which is thefairywhispering.com. If you want to reach out to the show, you can contact me, Claire, at The Fairy Whispering. On social media, you can find the podcast at The Fairy Whispering Podcast. Enjoy this episode. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for agreeing to be a guest and been really excited to speak to you about your fairy experiences and really been enjoying seeing your beautiful fairy art on social media.
Oh, thank you.
It's beautiful, and especially what you've been doing for Brett Manning's Fabery.
Yes, I've been struggling to keep on top of that, but yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
So, Jay, you've had some fairy encounters. Perhaps you could just start with an introduction to you and a bit of your background growing up in Australia. And you said you had some spooky experiences as a child. So maybe we could start there.
Yeah, sure, not a problem. I've more or less grown up around the Brisbane area. I sort of always heard stories about my Irish grandmother growing up, how she was a well-known psychic and she used to read tea leaves and playing cards. And the story goes that she got to the stage where she refused to read for any of the family or friends because she would see when they would die and how.
Um,
So that would leave her quite traumatized, I could imagine.
yes, imagine that. Yeah. Mm.
And as I got to probably about the age of 7 or 8, and I started having a few experiences myself where I would see disembodied hands appear through the wall when I was in bed.
Oh, wow.
There was a couple of times where I saw a person walk through the wall of the bedroom and walk to the end of my bed and just stood there staring at me for probably about 5 minutes or so, and then turned around and walked back out. And yeah, that kept happening quite a bit as I was getting older. It probably stopped around the time I was 12, but probably the ages between, say, 7 and 10 or 11, it happened quite a lot. My mum's told me a couple of stories where we were visiting friends and I actually started crying and they asked what the problem was. And I said, there was an elderly lady that died in this room and I didn't want to be in the room.
Mm.
And at the time, nobody really believed me. But as it turned out, the friend later on contacted my mother and said, actually, we just found out that the previous owner did actually die in this front room.
Was she the entity that was visiting you, or was that someone else?
No, no, this was somebody else. This was actually in a friend of the family's house. This particular entity.
Right, I see.
Yeah,
Yeah. How interesting. I'd just like to go back to
yeah,
the childhood experience with the hands.
yeah. Well, there was this one night especially. I sort of woke up um, with a start, um, probably in the middle of the night, and I was just sort of lying there, and I could see there was like a pendant light in the middle of my bedroom, hanging from the ceiling, and it started to rock from side to side. And I was sort of watching that. And then out of nowhere, this disembodied hand just sort of flew into the room, and it came down, and it sort of it's like it was swung back like it was about to hit me, and then it flew off to the other side of the room, and then it did that a couple of times, and then it sort of disappeared. And that's probably the first time I remember it happening. There were a couple of other times where a hand would reach out from um, where the head of my bed was through the wall and sort of and look like it was reaching out to grab something,
Ah,
and it would sort of reach out and then disappear back into the wall. And yeah, that um, Yeah, that lasted a good couple of months. That particular experience. Um, and then after a while, the hand stopped appearing, but there were other things that sort of happened, like the entity that walked through the wall and stood at the foot of my bed. Um, of course, at the time, my parents just said, you're dreaming, go back to sleep, sort of thing. Um, but yeah, it sort of happened quite regularly, right up until the time I was about 11 or 12.
Could you describe the entity and the hands, whether they looked human?
They were human. They were totally human looking. I, I think I thought at the time they were a woman's hands. They were quite slender and smooth looking, so I just assumed that they were, a lady's hands.
And the entity, was that female?
Yes, yes, it was an old lady.
Ah, okay.
I did describe her to my mum, but she, apart from saying no, it was just a dream, she never sort of said whether you know, it was anybody that she recognised.
Okay. So maybe someone that's to do with the land or the house.
Yeah, it could be, or it could have been a relative. For all I know, it could have been my psychic great grandmother, coming through and checking up on me. I don't know, but sort of looking back, I sort of think, well, maybe it was her.
Yeah, it's interesting she presented the hands, and I think you said that she used to read palms or
No, tea leaves and playing cards.
oh, okay.
So yeah, she was sort of really old school.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah. So growing up, I've always been interested in the paranormal, and once I left home, I explored my spirituality
Mm.
and attended psychic development classes. I went to a couple of spiritualist churches just to see what that was all about. And probably the only thing that really stuck with me throughout all these years is the practice of meditation.
Mm.
And probably that's what has helped with my current art, because that's where I see a lot of these entities.
Yeah, so that's your way of connecting.
That's my way of connecting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. And do you meditate at home, or is there a place in nature that you like to go to connect with with the fairies?
Mainly I do at home,
Mhm.
but occasionally I do. If I can find a nice quiet spot where I won't be disturbed, I will go out and meditate in nature. Um, Most of the time when I do actually meditate in nature, I do make some kind of connection, either with an entity, a spirit, or even an animal. I can, while meditating, I can sense that there is an animal nearby, and I'll open my eyes and they will actually walk out into the clearing, and yeah, I'll just have a beautiful experience.
Oh, wow. What sort of animals do you see, Jay?
Sometimes it'll be a possum. Other times it will be a small wallaby, or even different type of bird.
Mm.
A lot of the times, in a particular spot that I do go to, there's a family of yellow-breasted robins, and they absolutely love to come really, really close when I'm meditating. I won't see them at all when I'm, walking around the forest, but
Mm.
when I sit down and I'm quiet and I meditate, they will come out of seemingly nowhere. And sometimes they'll actually land on my leg, or they'll, you know, flutter around in front of my face, even.
That's such a wonderful affirmation, isn't it?
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, because when we meditate, our brain waves change, don't they? And then that must affect our aura. And
Oh, definitely.
yeah, so we're coming into this place of alignment, aren't we? That's the way I see it anyway. How do you see?
Yeah, I believe animals especially are very good at reading energy.
Hmm,
And when they see that your energy is actually relaxed and you're of no danger to them, they'll actually, they'll come quite close.
yes. Oh, that sounds really a beautiful experience to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you receive guidance or any messages whilst you're in these places, meditating?
Um, the strange thing is I will see entities when I'm meditating. Um, a lot of the time they won't speak though.
Mm.
So sometimes I'll just ask them to appear if I'm on the right track with a particular project, or if I'm on the right track in a particular aspect of my life. And sometimes I'll see a face sort of appear out of the mist behind my eyes,
Hmm.
and either they'll smile and nod, or they'll just laugh at me, or they'll just look quite stern as if they're saying, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. Hmm. Yes.
So, and from there, I sort of make the interpretation as to what the message would be.
Yeah. Do you think they're saying, what are you doing here in our space? Or what are you doing with your life path? Or is it both?
Uh,
Mm.
it could be either. If I feel if they are saying, "What are you doing in our space?" I will actually feel quite unwelcome. I won't be able to settle. There are places where I'm sure you've experienced this, places where you go where you just don't feel welcome.
Hmm. Definitely. Yes, I've definitely felt that, and it feels like a definite no.
For sure.
Have you found, so this is something, I mean, this is about you, but just something I found is that if I think, right, I'm going to push against that, and this is in the past, I've had this experience. I really want to walk over to that
Hmm.
tree. That looks, amazing. What that tree over there. So I'm going to ignore that, and I'm going to try and get to that tree, and then have faced sort of physical barriers like thorns or marshy areas or things, like fallen logs that are difficult to get over.
Yeah, and like an obstacle along the way.
Yeah, obstacles along the way.
I haven't experienced anything that's like a physical obstacle, but I have, in a way, been, for want of a better word, attacked spiritually.
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know if you'd like me to go into an experience like that, or
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that. Take your time.
yeah, sure. Okay. Um, there was this time where I um, went out into nature, into a national park, not too far from where I live. I was with a friend, and this is absolutely magical place. It's in the Gold Coast hinterland, and we're actually walking down to view the base of a waterfall.
Hmm.
And we were walking down, and off to the left, just off the track, I could see there was another track that was sort of leading off the path and it was heading out somewhere, but it couldn't really see where it was going. And I sort of said to my friend, "Have you ever seen this before?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Let's go see where that goes." And she's like, "No, no." just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, stay here and I'll go down and have a look. And so I sort of went down this path a bit, and then it led down into this little cave. And as soon as I went into the cave, I just had this feeling of unease,
Yeah.
and I felt like I wanted to turn around and run back. And I thought to myself, no, I'll sort of sit through this. And I guess in a way, I was probably being quite disrespectful because I started making noise in the cave and sort of playing with the echo
Mm.
and trying to find some kind of resonance frequency to make the noise
Mm-hmm.
louder. And the more I did this, the more I sort of felt like I've got to get out, I've got to get out. And so I finally left and got back onto the path. And we were walking along a little bit further, and then I felt a shove on my shoulder. And I turned around, and my friend was probably about 3 or 4 feet behind me. And I said, did you do that? And she said, no. What happened? I said, well, it felt like somebody shoved me. And she said, yeah, I saw you sort of move funny, but yeah, it wasn't me. So we took probably another few feet and I felt another shove. And I turned around and I said, look, this isn't funny. And she said, look, I like to joke around as much as the next person, but, it's too dangerous to do something like that because, just off the path was a 500-foot drop. So if you tripped and stumbled in the wrong direction, you definitely wouldn't survive. So this happened a few more times along the path. And we got back to the car park and all seemed fine. And then we went off to another area of the park. And it was just after dark. And we found some bioluminescent mushrooms that happened to be growing just off the car park. So we sort of went over there to take a few photos. And I was sort of kneeling down, I was taking some photos, and then all of a sudden there was just this rush of energy, and it hit me and just flew me backwards. And I went rolling down this embankment. And I landed and I couldn't breathe. I was gasping for air, and I sort of turned my head, and there was quite a bit of a drop just over to my side there. If I had kept going, I would have, dropped quite a fair bit. And as it turned out, I'd actually broken a few ribs.
Gosh, Jay. Wow.
So yeah, yeah. So just word of warning: never disrespect nature. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, my friend said she felt the whoosh of energy. She was right, sort of slightly in front, but to the side of me. She said she felt this rush of energy. She felt almost like a rush of wind, almost. And she saw me and she said it literally picked me up off the ground and I hit the ground on my side. So that was quite frightening. And yeah, I didn't go back there for probably a good, 6 to 8 months. I was just too scared to go back in there.
I'm not surprised. It must have taken you a while to recover from that as well. The
I,
injuries.
I, I was, to be honestly, I was terrified.
Mm.
Took a good 6 to 8 weeks for my ribs to heal.
Mm. What do you think that was? Did you have any insight or afterwards to what that could have been?
Um, Look, there are two things that I think it could have been. Um, I a couple of people and myself that have been down in that section of the forest have picked up sort of gnome energy, and a couple of people have actually seen gnomes down there.
Okay, yeah.
So it could have been gnomes, but when I think about it and I sort of look at it in my mind's eye, I see something much bigger,
Mm.
something big, something hairy. So I don't know, maybe a cave troll.
Yeah, cave troll, or I mean, could it have been? We were talking about the Yowie, weren't we, briefly?
True, true.
Could it have been something like that?
What could it be? Yeah, yeah. But very, very interesting, very scary.
Mm,
So I've been very, very careful every time I go back to that park.
yeah, I'd be interested to know if there was any Aboriginal stories or beliefs.
Oh, there was. There's a couple of Aboriginal sacred sites up that way.
Oh, okay. And did you speak to anyone from that community?
I've been trying to get in contact with some of the local community, but I haven't been able to make touch yet.
Okay. Yeah.
So this probably happened about 2 years ago.
Hmm.
Quite recent, but yeah. Um, I can give you an update in a couple of days because I'm actually going up there on Saturday with some friends.
Oh, are you?
Yes.
I'd love to hear about that, Jay.
Yeah, sure.
That'd be really good.
Yeah, so I'm going up with the friend that was with me at the time and a couple of other people that we now start meeting with regularly who are interested in the Fae and learning how to interact with them. So we're sort of taking them out and seeing if they can pick up any of the energies that we know are there and sort of take it from there.
I'm wondering whether there's a way to kind of make peace with whatever that was. And because you're using sound, whether a peace offering could be something like a song or some kind of gift, like a natural gift.
Mm. Yeah, well, I'm definitely taking a couple of offerings with me. I've got something from the local land here, a couple of shells from local beach. I thought I'd take, so that's something that they don't have in that section and may appreciate. And I've got a couple of crystals I'm going to take up with me as well.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And oh, yeah, I'd really love to hear the update on that. That'd be, yeah, and see what happens.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just wondering if you've had anything that you feel has followed you back from these places. Have you had any beings that have come home with you?
Um, I'm usually fairly careful. Before I even hop into my car to come home, I always sort of make sure I say nothing is to follow me, nothing is to come into the car with me, nothing is to, everything is to stay where you are. Um, there Maybe there was one incident where something did follow me home. I don't know where it came from, but there was this, I guess you could call it entity. It was sort of like a small shadow shape that was about the size of a tin can. And it used to just appear out of the corner of my eye, and it used to go between myself and my friend who was with me during the other experience, actually. And we sort of wonder whether it was something that followed us back from either that incident or from somewhere else that we've been together, because, yeah, it sort of used to flit in between us and it sort of had a negative aura around it. And whenever it would appear, we'd sort of either one of us would sort of go into this depressive sort of funk. And it was, yeah, it was really strange. And whenever either once we actually learnt that, both of us were actually experiencing this thing, we would sort of say to one another if the other one was, feeling a bit down, sort of say, well, have you seen the can? And after after a while, we sort of worked out that yes, that it would correspond.
Was it can shaped?
It was can shaped, yeah, yeah. Sort of, it was sort of like the shape of a cylinder, but it was like a jet black shadow
I
shape,
see. Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It a- apart from being a cylindrical shape, it didn't really have any other form, and it would just sort of float through the room. It was very, very odd.
That is strange, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in this part of the world where I am,
Mm.
I mean, all fairies, all these beings are shapeshifters, aren't they?
Oh, they
And
are. Yeah,
yeah, they can appear in these really strange forms. Like we have stories of, there's a story from Dartmoor, near where I live, that
right.
the pixies appeared as a bundle of rags to a child that they helped to,
Oh, really?
yeah, they helped to steer this child home. And from the child said, well, they look like bundles of rags, which I've always thought that's really a really
That's really odd.
odd description.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's so odd. It's not something that can be made up, really.
No, exactly. You know, if they'd said, oh, it's a little person with a green hat and a red tunic,
Yeah.
you might be inclined to think, oh, well, they've heard a story.
Mm.
But people have seen them
Yeah,
appearing like that as well. So, yeah, interesting.
most definitely.
So, before we move on to your other experience, I interviewed Alex,
Yeah.
who is a mutual friend of both of us, and
Yeah, that's right.
he's going to be on the podcast as well.
Yeah.
And he recorded some music,
Yes, that's right.
and I believe sent it to you, and you played it to a group, and some interesting things happened. I was just wondering if you could just share about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so it's the same group that I'm meeting with on Saturday. We're just sort of all interested in sort of similar things, and there's the two newest people in the group are interested in learning how to interact with the Fae and detecting Fae energy. So we're sort of working with them with that. And Alex had sent me this piece of music that he had channeled, and it really resonated with me. And I was actually meeting with my friends, I think it was a couple of days later. And I said to him, it'd be quite interesting to see what would happen if I played that music in my environment and how, if at all, the local Fae would react to it. So he said, yeah, that's fine with me. So we actually did it. It was at night. So we were under a shelter. We turned off the lights and I played the music. And as the music played, the first thing we noticed was all the crickets that were chirping. They changed the rhythm of their chirps to match the rhythm of the music. And that's something that we all noticed, and that was really, really amazing. And if it sort of stopped it there, we would have been happy because that was sort of proof that, um, there was some kind of interaction going on. And then we started hearing little footsteps running around the outskirts of where we were sitting. And we're sort of looking at each other. We didn't really want to say anything out loud, but we were sort of pointing and going, gesturing, saying, did you hear that? What's going on? And there were a couple of times where a couple of people said they felt taps on their shoulders. And I felt a couple of little taps on the back of my leg. And then a couple of people said they saw sort of little shadows running from bush to bush. And they're probably about 3 foot tall. And one of them said it's a gnome. And sort of said, well, how did you sort of come to that conclusion? And they said, I saw a little pointed hat. And I said, did you see any features? And they said, no, it was just a shadow, but I could definitely see the pointed hat. So I reported everything back to Alex the next day. And he said, well, that's interesting because that was a gnome song that I had channeled. So there was a confirmation there.
That's really interesting. And this piece of music, is it the one where Alex is playing his ukulele with a friend who's playing guitar? Is that the piece?
Guitar? Yeah, that's the one. That's the piece.
Yeah, yeah. That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's made me think about experimenting with that piece of music myself and other pieces of music as well, because of course people have heard fairy music, and I have people I know that are sound healers
Yeah.
that have played gongs and other healing sounds in nature and attracted fairies. So sound of a certain vibration seems to be very attractive to them, doesn't it?
It does. It does, definitely.
Mm.
There on Saturday, when we go up to the national park, there is an actual cave that we sort of go to that actually sings. If you sing in the cave, you hear singing come back, and it's sort of like a call and answer sort of thing.
That's amazing.
Which is, the first time I experienced that, that was just blew me away.
Is there any way you could record?
I could try. There's a waterfall in the actual cave, so
Uh,
the noise in there can get a bit deafening, but yeah, it's worth a try.
that's so interesting. So you've got water.
Yeah, you've got water, you've got the cave, you've got the resonance in there, and to make it even more magical, there are glowworms all lining the roof of the cave.
No way. Ah, that sounds amazing.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. If you ever come out this way, I'll take you up there.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to come back to Australia, Jay. I travelled there in my 20s on a working holiday
Yeah.
visa. Travelled up from Sydney up the east coast. Only briefly spent a bit of time in Brisbane, but I had a couple of months in Cairns working for the Aboriginal reconciliation.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and it was right by their office was short walk to Mount Whitfield National Park.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was just like heaven.
Did you have any experiences while you were out here?
Yes, I did. I didn't so much interpret it as fairies at that time. I think my mindset was more on angels, which I was just getting interested in. So
Yeah.
I'd always been interested in fairies, but
Hmm.
angelic energy seemed to call me more strongly at that time. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens. I mean, I was,
Oh, hello. I've lost you, Jay. Lost the sound. Oh, there we go. Yeah, you were just breaking up. I lost you for a couple of seconds there. So, what were you going to say? I just was talking about angels.
oh, okay. Yeah, I was just saying, it's just funny how we sort of come to the Fae. I never really was interested in them. I was always aware that they were around, but never really wanted to look into them, never really interested in interacting with them. And then it wasn't until I had my first experience that I actually was like, oh, okay, well, maybe there is something to this.
Maybe that'd be a good time to talk about this, your experience.
Yeah, sure.
This is the tree being.
This is the tree being, yeah. let's see, this was back in the early 90s, actually. And I was living with flatmates at the time, so I never really had any space or anywhere at home that I could meditate. So I found a local nature reserve that was fairly quiet that I used to go to every now and again to meditate. And on this particular day, while I was meditating, I heard movement off to my left. And at first I thought, oh, it's an animal, I'll just keep going. And then I heard movement again, and it sort of brought me out of it. And I opened my eyes and turned my head, and he was a strange looking entity. He was probably about 3.5 to 4 foot tall. His very sort of spindly. His arms and legs sort of look like branches. His skin looked like it was made out of bark. He appeared quite youthful, even though his skin was quite wrinkly from the texture of the bark. And he looked absolutely terrified. I'd actually seen him. And he was sort of crouching down, and he sort of looked around and sort of saw a bunch of bushes just a little bit away from where he was. So he sort of made this strange sort of crawling motion to go towards them. And then he just leapt into the bush. And then he sort of stuck his head out again and looked around and found another place that he could run to go further away from me, and did that again, and just kept going until he was out of sight. At the time, I was just too terrified to move. I was like, what the hell is this? Never seen anything like this. And even though this is something that I'd always wanted to experience, was, something otherworldly, I spent all the time trying to rationalize it, trying to say to myself, oh, okay, I was meditating. This is some kind of leftover hallucination from the meditation, maybe. It was just all in my head. But it stuck with me for the next couple of days. And then I thought, well, let's try it again. Let's see if it happens again. And this time I'll try not to be as scared. This time I'll see if, I can make contact with it, see if it'll speak to me. So I sort of went back to the same spot, tried meditating, nothing happened. I tried the next day, and lo and behold, he didn't appear physically, but he appeared in my mind. And when I meditate, I sort of, I don't know if you see sort of swirling colours as well when you sort of close your eyes and sort of concentrate. I know not everybody does, but some people do. And to help me focus, I do focus on those colours, and sometimes they will coalesce and they will form a shape, or they will form a face. And in this time, it formed the face of this being, and he was right there in my face, and he was laughing at me. And this time, he sort of had like a blue flame over where his third eye is.
Oh, right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And he had like a lotus symbol on his throat that sort of glowed.
Ah.
And I sort of, I tried to make contact, and he just sort of looked at me, smiled, and kept laughing, and then he faded away. But I imagine that the throat is communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course, third eye would be, sort of spiritual sight. So I took that as an indication that that's how I can make contact. And so I never saw that being again, but I did, probably about 12 months later, I saw a very similar being, but this one was a female and much older. She looked very ancient, and yeah, her hair seemed to be made out of dried grass almost. And it's sort of, as she moved, her hair would move almost like grass blowing in the wind. It was just, it's funny how time sort of slows down when you experience this kind of thing. Um, Sometimes it only lasts a couple of seconds, but the amount of detail that you can sort of see, um, sort of surprises me.
That's really incredible that you've seen these beings. And was this in the same place that you saw them both?
Not when I saw the female entity. This was, a little while later. I was actually living in the same place, and I was living there alone then. So this was my back courtyard. Over the fence was bushland, and I could. That's where I saw her. I was sitting in my courtyard, and when I came out of my meditation, I saw her walking past.
Did she look at you? Did either of these beings make direct eye contact with you?
Um, Both made eye contact. The first one was definitely because he was just terrified that I was. I guess he was terrified I was going to get up and move towards him or something. So he was watching me very intently for what I was going to do next and whether he could move without me moving as well. Um, but yes, the female entity that I saw, she was probably more confident, and she stood there for a good, 5 to 10 seconds, sort of looking at me, and then she just turned and walked away.
And were their eyes human looking or that colour?
Yeah, human looking, slightly bigger. Um, for want of a better description, they almost looked indigenous. So I don't know if they are sort of indigenous spirits to the area or something like that. But they were old. They were of the land. That's what I felt.
Land spirits. Wow. Have you drawn them or painted them, Jay?
Yes, I drew them at the time. Um, Nowhere near as good as some of the paintings I do now, but I do have drawings of both entities. So if you like, I can send you those.
Oh, I'd love to see them. Yeah, that sounds fascinating. I'm sure people listening would love to see those as well.
Yeah, no problem.
I know I've heard on Joe Hickey Hall's podcast, she's spoken to a few people about tree being of various sizes.
Yeah, okay.
And it's quite interesting, actually. You just talking to you just reminded me of something. When I first started, well, I used to belong to a fairy group on Facebook back in 2016. And it was after I'd done a short fairy course, which really got me back onto the fairy path. I'd sort of come on and off it for a few years because of work and various having children and various other things. And there was a woman in the group that became online friends with.
Hmm.
People shared photographs, and she'd taken this really interesting photograph of it was like this, and I drew it for her. I drew what I could see. And some people say, oh, it's pareidolia, some of these photos, and I can see
Right.
that with some photos, but this was like really interesting. It was like this being was almost, it was like a marsupial, but it didn't have a marsupial face. It had a sort of a cross between an animal and human face, and
Right.
it looked like it could jump because of its back legs were like kangaroo legs.
Mm.
And it was about three or 4 feet high,
Oh, wow.
and it had horns that looked like twigs. coming out of its head. So that's the way I interpreted it. And
Oh, no.
after what you've just said, I do feel that there are these fairies that are around us, and they're just blended into the environment, aren't they? They look like parts of the environment. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
So there's all types of, you might see, you know, a little person dressed in, what we'd like an old fashioned outfit, for example, and a little pointy hat, but you might see something.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, seen those.
might see something
Uh,
totally out there. Mm,
but yeah, it just depends on how they wish to present themselves to you, I think.
yes.
And I don't know whether it's the way that they shapeshift or the way they project to you how they want to be seen.
Yeah.
So whether they sort of scan your brain for a reference and go, oh, okay, this is what they think a fairy looks like. So this is how I'm going to appear.
Mm, yeah. That's my definitely my question, and that's why I have an open mind about, all of the reports I've read from the fairy census and experiences from books going back,
Mm.
hundreds of years, is every experience is valid, whether people see something or the appearance of something, whether they hear something or just get a feeling. All those interactions with what we call fairy are totally valid and add to our kind of, I suppose, knowledge database of what these beings could be.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Yeah,
But yeah, I find that the more similarities certain stories have, the more stories pop up that are totally off the wall and have nothing in common with anything else. So it's really, really hard to sort of pinpoint exactly what they are.
yeah. Why do you think you you were able to see these beings, or that they allowed you to see them?
Hmm.
Do you think do you think there's, I know the first one you saw
Yeah.
was surprised, and that's a common thing as well, that these beings sometimes are like, oh, they can see me, and they're as shocked as we are.
Yeah, I think maybe that first one thought that they were safe because I was sort of meditating and I was sort of in the flow of things and they thought that they wouldn't disturb me.
Yeah.
So when I suddenly, came out of my meditation, they weren't expecting it. So I guess that's what happened there. But on the other occasions, I'm not quite sure.
Mm,
I think to a degree they can sort of see what's in your soul and they can sort of see that I'm more or less a gentle kind of person. And maybe they feel safe. I don't know.
that's what I think. I think they're good at reading your heart, definitely, and intention.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And time doesn't exist the same way in their realm as it does in ours.
No, no. The couple of experiences that I've had, there is always a sort of feeling that time has slowed down and that the experience lasts longer than it actually has in real time.
Yeah, and I'm wondering whether that's because of the meditation is that our society, especially now, is becoming faster and faster, and with social media, we're very, all of us are very focused on that, and this very quick kind of
Yeah, for sure.
pace.
Yeah,
And when we meditate, we come back to our natural rhythm.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and then that allows us to see more, perceive more of what is actually invisible to us most of the time.
Yeah, true,
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
But no, whatever it is, it's definitely an interesting sort of path that they've put me on. So it's one that I'm enjoying the journey. So can't wait to see what the next chapter is going to be.
Oh, it's been lovely speaking to you. Is there anything else you want to share before we finish recording, Jay?
I am attempting to put together a body of work to hold an exhibition towards the end of the year. So keep an eye out for that. I want to do a series of traditional looking landscapes that incorporate fairy creatures. If you look hard, you will actually see them. So yeah, just something that I'd like to get out there and get my work out there. Hold my first exhibition.
Fabulous. And how can people see your work and connect with what you do, Jay?
Okay, well, I'm pretty much lazy on the social media, but you can find me at J Harvey on both Facebook and Instagram. I'm probably more active on Facebook. You can also find some of my work and other things on my business that I have with my friend Aurora. That's All the Fae Things, where we're a fairy business and we do all kinds of fairy arts and crafts. We go to all the local markets and sell our wares.
Lovely. Oh, that sounds amazing. I'll have a look at that and I'll put those links in the description for people to find you and have a look at your work.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for talking with me, Jay.
Oh, thanks for having me. Anytime.
Thank you to Jay for sharing his experiences with us. After we'd spoken, Jay sent me a recording of his return visit to the cave. So what you're about to hear is Jay's voice recording that he created on his phone of what happened when he returned to the cave, where he'd had the previous experience of being pushed by an unseen entity.
Hi Claire, it's Jay. I just thought I'd update you on our little experiment that we did on Saturday night. This is at the Springbrook National Park, at the Natural Bridge section. This is the basalt cave with the waterfall that I was telling you about in our interview. I'll just set the scene. It was midnight. We had the entire park to ourselves, therefore we had the cave to ourselves. The last tourist buses had left hours ago, so we were quite excited. We went up to the cave, and unfortunately we weren't able to record anything because the sound in there is just deafening. You can't hear anything. And honestly, when we played the music, you couldn't even hear the music. But we persisted anyway. We went ahead and I played that passage of gnome music from Alex that we were talking about in our interview. And although we couldn't hear anything, I let it play out because I figured if there's anything in the cave, they'll hear it and hopefully they'll respond. And unfortunately, at that stage, nothing seemed to actually respond at all. So we stood there a little bit longer. We meditated. We tried to make contact with the entities that were there. And although sensing some movement, there really wasn't anything going on. So probably after about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, we turned and we left. And as we were walking out, keep in mind this is in the pitch black because the glowworms are sensitive to bright light. So we're edging our way towards the stairs to leave the cave. And I had my hand on the handrail. And as we were inching our way along, I felt this cold, wet hand placed on top of the back of my own. And I don't think I've ever reefed my hand away from something as fast as I did that night. Yeah, it was creepy as anything. It felt solid. My two friends were in front of me, so there was no chance it was one of them behind me playing games. My friends must have sensed the movement because they turned to me and asked what was going on, and I told them. We quickly made our way out of the cave, and at the top of the cave, turned the torches back on, had a look at my hand, and it was wet, and all the veins on the back of that particular hand were just standing out so much. It was quite a sight to see, actually. I wish we had a thought to take a photo of it at the time. We're going to have to get better at this recording of evidence, but I have witnesses and a memory that's going to last me a long time.
After I'd listened to the recording, I emailed Jay and asked him whether he thought that the entity that had touched his hand was the same entity that had pushed him. And I said that it was strange that he had had experiences of seeing disembodied hands as a child. He said, it didn't occur to me that it may have been the same entity that pushed me. If it was, I guess it was a friendly enough gesture to imply all is good between us now. Thank you for the insight on the connection between my childhood experiences and this one. As we all know, there is no such thing as coincidence. So who knows, there may be a connection of sorts. The Fae seem to have an all-encompassing knowledge about those they choose to interact with. So they were probably aware I had been talking to you about my experiences, and it was a full circle moment. So I feel that's a great way to end this episode. You've been listening to the Fairy Whispering Podcast with me, Claire Casely. See you next time.